Hey everyone, this is Nathan Hitchcock, and I'm here to present to you some online church models. In a really kind of time-efficient way, I want to present to you 4 different models that are out there for doing online church. Obviously, the coronavirus has us in disarray, trying to figure out how to do this well in short order. But when people think about online church, they tend to have something in mind. They've seen like one kind of online church, and they start doing it that way, and they start establishing a pattern very quickly. Well, I want to show you the models that are out there right now, just the basic models, so that in just a few minutes you'll have a basic understanding of what those are and their pros and cons. The first one is web page. There are different versions of this, but the basic features are you record elements of the service and make them available from your web page. Congregants access things asynchronously. That word asynchronously means that they're not done linearly at the same time. So in other words, it's not a live thing, it's not a shared thing, but rather somebody goes to church at 9:30 a.m. on Sunday, somebody else starts at 9:55, somebody else starts at 10:12, somebody else starts at 1:30 on a Tuesday. Is asynchronous. It's usually sermon-centric. Basically, every single web page I've seen designed for church online is the message at the center. There's minimal interaction or response in these. Here are a few examples. You'll see this in a lot of web pages these days. They'll say, hey, we're not meeting today, but go ahead and you can hear our sermon online. And so you go to a media archive like this one from Lexington Community Church, or perhaps you have some kind of other thing on your website which allows people to hear or see a video. Here's one that we did a Sunday after really coronavirus shut everything down. Charity and I led some worship, and then our pastor, Bill, preached a sermon. We had a Prayers of the People feature, and it was all right there on a single page. You get a little fancier and spend a lot more money, and you can get an app. And I actually threw in apps here on web pages because that's essentially what they are. They're more cleanly delivered, but it really is the same idea. You get content delivery out there, fast and furious, and there's some minimal opportunities to be active, things like money. This is from Subsplash, and they're actually developing this right now. They're actually finally building some active pieces. So yeah, Subsplash, push pay, fairly pricey, but you can get content out to your people very easily. And so you can think of the advantages. That's what a web page is that it's very easy to get it out there. It's easy to get people connected to it. They can access it. The disadvantages is it can be hard to build a really good one. It can be expensive if you do it well. And really, there's not much interaction. You can have a button there to give back via PayPal or Stripe or something else like that, but it's not very interactive. Which is why some people are going to Livestream. The web page also doesn't feel very communal, so they say, well, let's at least have everybody access the sermon and the service even at the same time. That's what the live stream option is. It's a live service, full or reduced, that's streamed online through YouTube, Facebook, or a church website. It uses a skeleton crew of leaders to keep numbers and exposure down. All the ones that I know of right now, they're not getting everybody in there. They might actually have a handful of people in the congregation itself, well spaced out. But really, it's just the basic people you need to run the service. It's typically videotape. There's still a limited amount of real-time interaction, and there's usually a recording of all the things that transpired in that service. So if people want to watch later, they can do that. But most people are watching at the same time. So for example, here's a local church that's doing just this. Stream the whole service. You can see there's a little bit of chat going on the side. If you want to get a little fancier, this is actually a free thing that you can use. You can use Life.Church's app, or not their app, but rather the software, which allows you to have a platform to get your content out. They have that free for churches. But you can still see it's the same thing. It is a live feed, kind of like TV, and then you have some kind of minimal interaction. There's a chat right there on the side, which usually includes things like people saying hallelujah and other people saying who's here, and then there's a Russian troll that pops in. Advantages and disadvantages. Well, the advantages is that it feels like community because everybody's there watching it. And you can even do creative stuff like have a watch party where, certain people get together in the flesh to watch the same screen. But yeah, it's together, but it's not really. That's the disadvantage, is that there's not much interaction. There's not much community. It feels kind of thin. Which leads us to teleconferencing. Some churches are starting to do this. In a teleconference, people sign in or call into teleconferencing software, things like Zoom or Hangouts, or Skype. Congregants follow along from home, participating at times. The idea is that you can see other people up there. Individuals' video and or audio can, and I think should, be muted most of the time. It saves on bandwidth, it reduces some of the clutter, but it's kind of nice to see other people. You can utilize screen share and chat. In fact, I'm recording right now on Zoom. I'm using a teleconference to make this very video. You can chat with other people, even privately on some of these. And it can be recorded for those who want to watch it later. So people have been using this in business environments for quite some time. Churches are picking up on it fast. Here's an example of an actual church service. And you can see that various people are contributing. Some people can call in by phone, so people can hear at the very least. But the idea is that most people are muted, and you want to keep people muted when you have something like reciting the Lord's Prayer or responsive reading or things like that. You rather just want to have some leaders there because of the latency that a lot of echoes, and it really gums things up fast. Nevertheless, you're all live, and it feels kind of like community that you can see each other. And that's the advantage, is that this is probably the best thing that we have going right now as far as a live church service. So long as you don't have thousands of people on there, or even hundreds of people, smaller groups. Yeah, you actually have something like community. It's a virtual community, but there you are. And that's a very meaningful thing during this time of distancing. But there are disadvantages still. You don't necessarily have the robust interaction. You're not able to track exactly things, even exactly who's there. Sometimes people call in and they don't have their ID showing. It can be very disruptive. You got to really police things to make sure there's not too much noise and chaos. So there's some learning curves there. In the end, it kind of feels like a copy of Sunday, and not a great copy either. Of course, you got to get people to figure out the technology too. So teleconferencing is a good solution, but it's not everything. Which leads me to a fourth one that most pastors don't know about, most leaders don't know about. It's the LMS. In the LMS, people sign in to this LMS. It's a learning management system. That's what it stands for. And they use it as a discipleship hub. Let me just slow down for a second and explain that. It's not a content delivery system only. It's actually a place where you have your resources, but you're also inviting people to respond in certain ways. Historically, this has been used for schools. So for an online course, students would not just get a lecture or get an article, but they would also submit a paper. They would also participate in a discussion forum, something like that. These are used widely in schools and even in businesses now for training purposes and for community purposes, but it hasn't been adopted by churches so far because we've never really been forced to think about having a robust community online. But in the LMS, you can really contain it all. Church service elements and follow-up and weekly programming in one place. More importantly, there's lots of interactive pieces. Response boxes, discussions, giving links, chat rooms, etc. There's actually a lot of places for people to interact and to have that recorded in some way. So the church is all there together. You actually can have synchronous elements. Most of this is asynchronous, but you can actually build in live elements. Or at the very least, you can have a link to a live element. Say, hey, we're going to start this week by worshiping together, either through Zoom, or perhaps you can go to a pre-recorded sermon, or what have you. But I like the synchronous thing, connecting that in there too. So it's actually a combination of together and then individually going through things. And an LMS also tracks completion. That is, people can see what they've done and not done, and the pastors and leaders can see what people are completing and not completing. So there's shared information. Here's an example of a very kind of stripped down version. This is through Moodle or Moodle Cloud. It's free. And you can see what happens here is that, yeah, you just build in the pieces of the service, very simple. And then you have some weekly programs. You have tithes and offerings where you can give right there. In theory, you could have some discussion forums, and that would be fine. That's a really stripped down version though. So I want to show you one that is more robust. And full disclosure, this is one that I'm working on right now. It's called plus.church. The idea is that your church would have its a domain that it goes to. So it'd be our.plus.church. And it would go to a specific week that you've created. This is not my content. This would be your content in the end. What it looks like is this. I built this one for some pastors who are going through it right now. And you can see that in the Leaders Edition, this is a church that I built, I suppose, to show other people what it looks like. And you can see here from a, eagle's eye view, there's a welcome, there's the worship service, there are next steps, and then further discipleship. This would be the programs of the church. So let's see what it looks like. You open up the steps, you can see. So here's a welcome. Okay, so that's me welcoming people. This would be you if you are the leader of a church. You complete the step and go to the next one. This would be as a user. Welcome to Plus Church. Here are the basic rules, the way it's laid out. And what's different about this is that when you get started, you'll notice that it's really strung together. It has the worship service, all the different elements, but it's more than that. There are actually extra opportunities. There are next steps. There's a continuum of discipleship, you might say. And this has been the problem for a lot of us in church, is that we have people who show up on Sunday occasionally, but they're not necessarily going to the next thing. And they're not giving feedback apart from the rare text or email to a pastor. So how is this sinking in? How is it being built upon? And how is it community? Well, let's see what the community looks like here as we go through this. Now, the worship service is going to look an awful lot like other real worship services. You have an introduction. This one here I've tried to frame thematically. You can do it however you please. The next step is that you sing. You can see what I've done here is I've built in music videos. So this would be a lyric video, another lyric video, another lyric video. If you wanted to do a live service in its place here, that's totally okay. If you want to make your own videos, totally possible within this platform. Announcements. There's a responsive reading that people can do collectively together, for example, a family of 5, or you could do it on your own. So all of this then is set up, and none of this is terribly creative. This is sort of what a typical Protestant service looks like, or evangelical service. And again, you can build it however you darn please. What I want to really show you here is this, is that this one right here goes straight to this next category, the next steps. And here's where you get to do stuff that you couldn't do on a Sunday morning. Here's where church actually gets better. So straight away, people are invited to answer this question. What was your key takeaway from the service? Somebody can go in there and type that in. That's what I typed in. When they say complete step, that information goes to the administrator, typically the pastor or a worship leader of that particular cohort, a congregation. They have other opportunities though. Here's the praise board. What do you praise God for today? And this is really just a discussion forum. And you can type in really anything you want. Say, I'm thankful son recovered from his cold, which he did. Okay. Or I suppose, you could just skip that entirely and you could go on to the next thing. Right there. Here's a prayer board, works the same way. I would encourage you to have something like this, no matter what version of online church you're doing, where people can connect and be praying for each other. Okay. Again, people are free to skip steps if they want to. But you can build in other things so that you're getting some kind of data feedback, so that you're actually keeping track of people through information sharing. So here you go. People actually have an opportunity to say that they met for care with others. All right, so you see here that if they met with their small group, then there it is. If they met with a pastor, they can do that. It's information they've shared with you, and it helps you to keep track of the flock. But then you have follow-up steps like this. Next steps like study Proverbs 3, 5 through 6. If you're talking about trust that week, but you didn't really get into this particular passage, here's a way to follow up on it. People might use this as a devotion or even as a study, personal or group. And you can see here I've actually built in some questions. I can't help it. I'm a former professor. Right? So you can actually do a study with the pastor or the cohort leader. But again, some people might skip all of this, and that's fine. But you actually have the possibility of encouraging people to take next steps beyond just that quote unquote Sunday morning experience. And here's some other programs that I threw in, or some other challenges. Keeping track of a certain study, and I give examples in there. Report a way you trusted God this week. It's kind of a reflection there towards the end of the week. Now you may look at this and go, ugh, that's not how we do church. That's not how I'd want to do church. Fine, that's great. If you have ideas about what would make it better, even more interactive, even more amazing, something to hit your congregation, then you should do just that. But if you're interested in exploring an LMS solution like Plus.Church, please get in contact with me. I'd love to talk to you about that, or at least to help you find the right one. Because here's the deal, we're losing an awful lot of stuff right now during the coronavirus outbreak. And we might be doing this for quite some time, we're told. So instead of just thinking about it as loss, think about the possibilities. How could this actually be a blessing in disguise? And I think an LMS is a great way to be thinking optimistically, because there are some disadvantages. It does cost a little bit of money. It's a disadvantage that you can't build in all the live elements. And of course, you do need people to get a new login, which nobody likes to do, be one new login. But think about the advantages. Now you can build in all of this stuff, get your content out there, but more than that, actually have people follow up with discipleship steps where they can actually give feedback to you and interact with each other. So it becomes a kind of community. It becomes an ecosystem. Well, at the very least, I hope that you understand these 4 options now: web page, live stream, teleconference, LMS, and that you find the right solution for your congregation, that you put it together. You might even be able to combine elements. I'm sure some of you are very creative that way. But in any case, I hope you find that right thing. If you're interested in talking to me about Plus Church, or you know a church that might be, I would love to hear from you. God bless you all.